good candy feels like this. Probably not supposed to be doing this. I probably have a rule about that. So, we're sitting here, yeah? And if we make no comment about this moment, that's it. Make a comment about it. This is fantastic. Or, I'll never come here again. Or, that's a comment about the way things are. If I notice that's a grumble. Grumble feels this way. I'm back with the silence, aren't I? If I say, I shouldn't grumble, you should be grateful. You know, people would kill to have this kind of opportunity or something like that, right? That doesn't make sense, does it? But then you still haven't been aware of the grumble. You become the person who is now opposing the grumble, right? So the tendency of thought is always to go and just keep spinning around in endless segues. So one, I think, helpful thing on a retreat in the rest of your life is to say more silence. That's a good suggestion, which is different than saying stop thinking. Stop thinking is an aversive reaction to thought, which I think most meditators have, because you tend to have you want to be more peaceful and you're quiet of the chatter. The chatter is just nature. It's natural. So I don't think we're trying to control the mind. I think we're just trying to find a different dimension which knows the mind. If you see what I mean. And so again, the error I made was I was just trying to control the mind, and with great lack of success. I could control behavior, mostly. I would hurt someone and try to get my speech a bit better each day. But the arising of emotions or the habitual thoughts would come. And so I started to kind of think more, well, from my readings and from Luang Samedo and others, I started to think around the unchanging. That's the language of liberation that I really like. The unconditioned, the timeless, the unbecome. That's one of the ways they put it. Nirvana. And so that rather than opposing thought in a kind of controlling way, I think my mind, because it enjoys investigation, it enjoys problem solving in that way, then the question would come up from those reflections and from Luang Por's suggestion, well, what doesn't change, what doesn't move, what doesn't begin, what doesn't end, what isn't born, what doesn't die, that is the language of, to me, that's the language of transcendence. So I guess transcendence is a difficult word also in English, but that which is not just psychological. So I think because I was with a teacher who understood psychology from a Western viewpoint and respected it, but also had this deep love of transcendence from his own readings and from his own practice, that was really effective for me. So that to me is more like a turning towards something, the center, rather than fighting the periphery. And that to me is this moment where I stop all the strategizing and all the judgment and all the analysis, etc., and just witness this moment in a very simple way. And then, so I call that maybe, it's commonly called what, stillness of being? Could be that. If you took it in terms of the Four Noble Truths, you could say it's non-desire. Right? And so that takes you to Nirodha, non-becoming. Like when I just am here, I'm not trying to get anything special. Non-resistance. Of course, that gets difficult when there's pain and emotional pain or physical pain, but even when that's there, it's possible. But in this situation, if you haven't got much negative going on, you can train in that non-resistance, non-becoming. I use that language a lot. And then also non-preoccupation. I use that a lot. So I think with the thinking mind, that my concern myself is non-preoccupation, because the preoccupation with thought takes me to the spinning wheel of birth and death, of self, very much self, right? And then the noticing of that non-preoccupation, availability. I use that word, don't I? And so, like, if I'm just sitting here, just be available. It's a curious kind of word, but to me that's freedom. It's very simple. What's complex, of course, is the habits of a lifetime, even a monastic lifetime of whatever have you. So more silence, but that any suggestion one makes can be misappropriated by desire. Okay, now I'm going to practice more silence. I'm going to do this. Shut up. And you're caught in the same thing. So giving any instruction is risky. But like I said, I got to earn my rice. My candy's stuck in my mouth now. But the thinking mind and the self mind is so complicated, isn't it? It's so complicated. And to extricate yourself from that, who is doing that? Am I doing extricating from my self-thinking? Well, I think it's a remembrance of presence. Like it's a remembrance. It's like this. It isn't a becoming. And that you can make a suggestion towards. Remember the present moment. I mean, this is cliche Buddhism, I know. Be present, be here now. Ram Dass said that 50 years ago. And my apologies, I think it still works. Because he was right. And we're just remembering something that, intuitively we all know. Like one of the insights which I found very, very helpful quite a while ago, and then I developed a phrase around that, was that the idea that when distracted thinking took place, that I wasn't aware, I realized, well, presence was always there. There was always a knowing that thinking was there. But the idea that now I'm going to be a guy that's not thinking, that was the confusion. And just one day I thought, well, actually, presence is never absent. So I started to ask people that, is presence ever absent? And they just looked at me. Yeah, I'm always absent-minded. But is that true? Even when you thought you were driving to the office and you drove to Walmart, presence is always there. Not just because you drove the car, because that knowing, awareness, space, consciousness, say, it's always there. It's always there. And that's why I think that's transcendence, turning towards that. So what's right effort? What's right effort? Well, to me, right effort is the awakening to that. Just this moment when I say to myself, what's it like now? It's like this, quote the great teacher, but without all the commentary. It's what's it like now? It's hot. No. That's taking it extra. Just like right now. Silence. And then the trust bit. The trust bit, as I said, to me is the heart. So you could say acceptance. We use that a lot, like Luang Samedi uses metta bhavana as acceptance. Now, again, you have to remember that this is not a worldly suggestion, it's a spiritual suggestion. So some things are unacceptable. Like if you have someone in your workplace who is taking money from the petty cash, that's unacceptable. You do things to make sure that doesn't happen, right? So that's where people sometimes get confused with the worldly dharmas and then our own kind of inner work. But acceptance of that all things arise and cease in awareness. That's another one that I think helps in terms of silence, is that I always describe this, but say, I can see Hua sitting over there, and Hua can see me, right? So there's spatial perception. Hua's experience is hers, my experience is mine. So there is individuality, but I can also change my perception, and this is not so common. I can see, notice, consider that this experience takes place in awareness. So there is spatial perception, recognition going on, but that's taking place in awareness. This whole room's taking place in awareness. That's not a common way to consider life, but it is true. Without consciousness, without awareness, this can't take place. It takes place in awareness. Now that is not, I'm not suggesting some kind of philosophical position, because then you get all wrapped up in thinking again. But as a pragmatic perception, a pragmatic tool, you can do that. Oh, this is in awareness. And then that, what I find helpful, then my mind, which gets attracted to someone coughing or to a thought, I can say, well, that attraction or not is in awareness. It is in awareness. So constantly the suggestion is openness, so space. Space is something that Luang Samedi has always loved, used, and recommended. He talks a lot about it. One of the reasons he liked Amaravati, other than it was cheap, and we didn't have any money, was that it was on top of a kind of a hill. And he loved the open skies, the open space. And I think we all do, don't we? You go out in the night, like the night skies now at Tisser, wow. Or the desert in Jordan, and in Israel, just this beautiful, beautiful open skies. So we like that. And that's, I don't think that's just a kind of experiential wow. It can mean more, because I think it for me, it relates to the space of consciousness. The consciousness, you could say, is, what is it? It's like knowing space. Should we say that? Knowing space? It's hard to put words around it because you can't really describe it. So sitting here now, that this experience is in awareness. Sounds outside are in awareness. Mind knowing mind. Then someone behind me starts talking and laughing, and my mind goes, oh, I wonder who that is. Nothing wrong with that. But if my mind stays out there, I wonder who they are. And then it segues into, yeah, I bet you that was George next door. Yeah, I wonder what George is doing. Oh, he's turning his allotment. And the mind is just born again into its whatever it likes to do. So coming back to the center, it's like this. And when you start to just really consider experience rather than have some strategy and methodology where you're going to get enlightened, forget it. But if you just look at what is, like right now, like for me, there's consciousness, there's presence, name it what you will. I can ask myself, is there a center to awareness? Like, is there a fixed point? I can't find it. But what that question does, it brings me to silence. Is there a fixed, like a center? Like, am I aware? Is there like perception of a room and objects and consciousness and a third thing called I? Is there? Like, is there this third bit? And in observing, I could say, well, I am aware, yeah. And then when that thought stops, what do you have? You have Brian coming from outside. Thank you, Brian. Come on in, sir. We missed you. Yeah. You made it. There you go.
I'm sorry.
No. I enjoy seeing you. Always happy to see you. Go back to that? I don't know if that's worthwhile, but I do find myself this kind of contemplation of suchness rather than... I don't like beliefs. I'm not really good on beliefs. Although I believe all kinds of garbage, I know, but in terms of spirituality, I think for me it's more like, what's going on now? What's actually going on? So go back to that. Can I? Is there a fixed point called a me? Yeah, I am aware. Thought stops. Can't find a fixed point. There is consciousness, there is individuality, and there is change. Or I could say, is there a boundary to that? Does awareness have a boundary? An edge? Well, it's the room. No. So I think these kinds of questions, what they do for me is they accentuate the transcendent. Because you can't define it, you can't really find the trend. Like, does awareness have gray hair or black hair? Doesn't make sense. Is awareness French Canadian or English Canadian? Does it have a Quebec accent? Of course, that's so absurd, and yet it is. Consciousness is. So it has no characteristics. It has no qualities. It is. And that isness is, to me, the stillness of being. And my curiosity is obviously around that. It's also around things. You know, I like playing with things and such like. But in a spiritual path, it's this possibility. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyway, it filled up much of the half an hour. But what my encouragement is this kind of curiosity about suchness. And rather than the judgment around yourself, around your emotions, or the attempt to become someone who doesn't have emotions, or this kind of insidious creation of a sense of self, which comes up constantly through all the habitual patterns that we have from childhood and who knows where. So self-making, I-making, my-making is really the attachment. Being annoyed at someone is not attachment, it's habit. It's just karma. So you feel annoyed at someone on the retreat, no problem, it's just annoyance. Annoyance feels this way. If you take refuge in an ideal that you shouldn't be annoyed, you're toast, you're finished, because annoyance will come up. If you punch the person in the head, then you're out. So please, behave yourself, or something like that. But annoyance itself is just part of it. So we accept everything, don't we? That's what Metta Bhavana is about, acceptance of all. And then right speech, right action. So the challenge is, where does I-making, my-making come up in your habitual mental patterns? Where does the sense of self come up most strongly? And where do you believe in that? That's your greatest source of delusion and your greatest source of liberation. Because if you can bear witness to a strong let's say someone is very self-critical and judgmental. That's a common one. And it's really just barking in your head. And you say, oh, self-criticism feels this way. Even though it seems very real, you stay with that. You stay with that. You've done yourself a great service of freedom. Because that which defined your ego, in the most strong way, you've said, I know you, Mara. I know it. And you've taken the posture of witnessing, bearing witness too. And it comes up and it comes up. Yeah, this is awful. And awful feels this way. And you keep doing it and doing it and doing it until that whole ego structure withers, because it's not permanent. It's not who you are. You are consciousness itself, awareness itself. And that's the hard work. You know, when like in Rumi's poetry, I always like when he talks about the burning. He's got one. Chickpeas, yeah, I think like there's a cook and he's got a wok and he's frying chickpeas on the wok, and some of the chickpeas are bouncing off the wok, and the cook keeps putting them back in. And Rumi says, yeah, give me burning. Give me burning. And I think that's what he's talking about. He's talking about that being in a difficult situation, which is not life-threatening, obviously. We're not talking about that. And your buttons get pressed and these things come up and you say, oh, it's like this, give me burning. and the freedom that comes from that is, it's not a circumstantial, created kind of freedom. It's the freedom of nirodha, the freedom of cessation, where things have gone away from the mind, have ceased from the mind, because you've now taking your identity as witness rather than as object. You are no longer that ahankara mimamkara. And that's hard work, because those I making, my making, that stuff is very believable, very much that way. Okay, so just some thoughts. Just the one word on walking meditation. So I would suggest that you've all done practice yourselves, but I think the suggestion of walking with stillness, walking with silence, that's your companion. So as a suggestion, mark out your path, 20, 30 paces, whatever you like, and make it a form of meditation, the walking meditation. And so the forest tradition from Thailand, our tradition, that alternating sitting walking was the kind of bread and butter stuff of monastic life, where you really, if you had a long session, you kind of go for it for 5, 6, 7 hours, and you could do that without really it being that difficult. We had a lot of space, but then the walking is simply, I think, like at the end of like at the beginning of the path, at each end, keep establishing presence, rather than doing it perfunctorily and just doing a U-turn and keep thinking about the same thing, but actually stop and just listen, be, and then walk with that beingness, and then stop, walk with that beingness. It's very, and it seems very unproductive, like it's not super high samadhi, but you'll find that by doing it, your mind will be calmed, obviously. It works that way. So establish that stillness, that like right now. I say, so what's it like now? Establish that. And then with Yoga Nidra, I know many of us need new joints. I might get a knee replacement in January, and the people who helped me in Bangkok, the great people, I wrote to them. They said, yeah, sure. Same team, different joint. Because I had a shoulder operation. Anyway. So if you are in that category of ancien, Yoga Nidra is a great posture. Yoga Nidra is a great posture anyway. I must admit that posture for me has really helped me in my formal practice, because my body's pretty much like, doesn't really sit cross-legged, but there's something about trust and care and falling backwards into your mother's arms that my mother was a very loving woman, so I can do that. But that facilitates a kind of a lack of necessity to do anything about the body except set it up. You have to set it up, right? So make sure that if you do Yoga Nidra, that's lying meditation, put a bolster or a pillow under your knees. Make sure your neck is just right, so it's not like this, or it's not tucked in, or it's too open. And then try not to move. And then if you have physical issues, but if you can develop that posture and you have physical disabilities, you can do really long meditations. So as I say now, I do that in the mornings before breakfast. I have a good long meditation in bed. I get a good night's sleep. So people say, well, what if I fall asleep? Well, fall asleep. You need sleep. But then, when you wake up, stay in bed. Hey, wash your face, brush your teeth, and have a cup of tea or whatever, but just go back to bed. Use something that's comfortable. But set it up and try to learn that posture, because it'll come in handy eventually. And it is a posture that's not talked about much. And we don't usually do it like as a group, because I think the snoring would be really fabulous. But I think it's very worth developing. So in these afternoons or mornings, if you want to try Yoga Nidra, sure, do that. If you want to do walking, but try to get a period of what we call formal practice, where you're going for 2 hours at least, or 3 hours, where you're not digesting anything, even Dharma material, where you're not engaging with the stuff of the world. You're remembering the center. You're remembering your home ground. You remember witnessing. And if you can make those intentions for long periods of time, then those intentions play out a lot. Shall we sit? Okay. Some food.